This film starts with a rich husband and wife named Alan and Gemma. They had just come home from shopping when they saw their neighbors about to go for a walk with their children. Alan and Gemma were rich but didn't have children. At the same time, in front of their house was an old man with a little boy who was eating on the side of the road. When they saw this scene, Gemma became sad. At night, before Gemma went to sleep, she felt sorry to see the grandfather and his grandson sleeping on the side of the road on cardboard, so the next morning, she and Alan met them to give them food. They got to know the old man and this little boy. They were Lolo and Kid, because they were very polite and funny, so Gemma and Alan invited them into the house. While Kid enjoyed ice cream, Lolo said that even though he was poor, he didn't want Kid to grow up like other homeless. He also said that Kid had been orphaned since he was little, so as a grandfather, he was the one who looked after Kid. Alan said that he and Gemma wanted to adopt Kid because they couldn't have a kid. Seeing that Kid was very happy, Lolo agreed. After that, he said goodbye to Kid. Before leaving, Alan gave him some money. Lolo didn't want to accept it because he wasn't selling Kid, but Alan insisted. Because Lolo was leaving, Kid cried and didn't want to be separated from his grandfather. Lolo was forced to leave Kid for the good and future of Kid himself, but it was all a lie. In the middle of the night, when Alan and Gemma were asleep, Kid woke up, took luxury items out of the house, and ran away from there with Lolo. It turned out that they were both taking advantage of the sympathy of rich, kind people. Lolo was a con man and Kid was his partners. The goods they got were immediately sold to a seller named Taba. After getting the money, they shopped for daily necessities and went on a shopping spree. With a lot of money, Lolo took Kid to an amusement park and karaoke. Even though they were poor, Lolo didn't like it when Kid did rude things like cursing. He wanted Kid to grow up by respecting his elders and becoming a good person. He also didn't let Kid drink alcohol like him because he didn't want Kid to be like the homeless outside who smoke and become drug addicts. Lolo called themselves rich and dignified homeless, even though his words were the opposite of what they did. When they had money, they would stay at a motel. And when they were running out of money, they would look for new victims, or what they call donors. Kid was in charge of stealing the house while Lolo was in charge of looking for donors or victims. For this, Lolo had his own criteria. He would carry out surveys in elite areas, looking around and monitoring the target house, such as how many people lived in the house and what time the target left and returned from work. Of course, the target had to be rich and kind people who loved children. Lolo would see whether there were bicycles or children's toys in the house or not, and if not, that's the house that would be their next target. At night, the host of potential donors returned home and Lolo and Kid were already waiting in front of the house. They went into action and sure enough, they managed to steal the attention of their target. They were invited into the house by the host named Sandra. She was an unmarried career woman due to trauma and was only accompanied by her assistants and a driver. She offered Lolo and Kid to stay at her place because she had many empty rooms. She also offered to help Lolo so that Kid could go to school. It turned out that Sandra was also an orphan. She was in and out of social services until she was finally adopted and was able to go to school, so she also wanted Kid to have a future like her. In fact, this was a good opportunity for Kid. Even Lolo was also thinking about the offer, but that night, they still stole from Sandra. When they came out of the house from upstairs, Sandra saw them. Of course, she felt disappointed. Likewise with Lolo, who felt guilty. Lolo still invited Kid to continue their life as usual. After making a profit from the sale, they spent the money to have fun. When they returned to the motel in a state of drunkenness, Lolo began telling stories. He said that what they did was true because this was the way God wrote his life. He was poor since he could remember and couldn't get an education. He even wondered whether God was real or not because no matter how many times he went to church, his life was always miserable. One time, Kid asked why couldn't he go to school. Lolo said they couldn't afford it. Moreover, everything taught in school could be learned on the street. Kid remembered what Sandra said that she could be rich because she went to school, but Lolo didn't agree because not everyone who went to school would be smart and rich. He even justified their theft because in this life, if they didn't trick other people, they would be the ones tricked. But what he said to Kid was also the opposite of his wishes. One day, as usual, Lolo would leave Kid in the park while he looked for a new target in an elite housing complex. After getting the target, he returned to the park to meet Kid, but when he came back, he couldn't find Kid there. Lolo looked for Kid everywhere, and it turned out Kid was standing in front of an elementary school gate. Kid wanted to go to school and learn how to read. One day, they were invited by a rich gay couple. Besides welcoming and giving food to both of them, the couple also wanted to adopt Kid. Lolo, as usual, agreed to the offer. He also got an envelope containing more money than he had ever received, but at night, when they wanted to run away, they were caught and chased by this couple. On the road, amid the panic, Kid was hit by a car when he wanted to cross the road. He was rushed to hospital. The doctor said Kid didn't suffer serious injuries and could go home the next morning. Outside, Lolo was scolded by the couple. They refused the money and goods returned by Lolo and told him to leave Kid with them because otherwise they would call the police. Lolo left the hospital alone that night, but his little heart said he couldn't just leave Kid like that. Unexpectedly, Kid managed to escape and they were able to go back to the motel together. That night, Lolo promised to take Kid on holiday to the beach. Of course, Kid was very happy because he always wanted to go to the beach for a long time. For the first time, the two of them were on vacation to a faraway place. When they were enjoying the sunset, Kid said that Lolo could be an actor because he was so good at acting that his victims always felt sorry for him. Lolo said that he had once acted in films as an extra. However, because he had difficulty memorizing the script, the director was always angry with him and the agency didn't want to hire him anymore. It was better if he acted in the real world because the pay was better. Then Kid told Lolo to get a book that he got from the trash, and because he couldn't read, he told Lolo to read the book for him. They then rested on the beach until the sunset. When Kid fell asleep, Lolo remembered his past when he used to be a drunk loser and homeless. When he was frustrated and was about to end his life, he heard the sound of a baby in the trash can. He decided to look after the baby. It was then revealed that Kid was not his biological grandchild, but an abandoned child which he decided to look after. While looking after Kid, Lolo usually sold stuff around the church. He loved Kid like his own family. On the way home, Lolo told Kid that he loved him so much. Long story short, they found a new target. They were a couple named Irma and Joel. They wanted to adopt Kid because they had just lost a child due to cancer. They were very sad and it was difficult for them to live a normal life. But when they saw Kid, the shadow of their child came back. They both promised to love Kid as their own child and wouldn't consider Kid as a replacement for their deceased child. Irma said that they would not separate Lolo and Kid. Lolo was welcome to come anytime if he missed his grandson. Lolo saw that this couple was different. They were not only kind, but also religious. On that day, Lolo made a different decision. That night, when Kid came out of the house with the stolen goods, Lolo didn't help him to run away. He confidently told Kid to stay because he was sure that Kid's life would be much safer and he would be able to go to school. Lolo apologized and then left. Kid, who knew that Lolo wasn't acting, immediately tried to chase Lolo with tears. Of course, Lolo was also sad, but all this was for Kid's better future. It wasn't easy for Kid to adapt to a new family and part with people who had been with him since he was little. One night, Kid decided to run away from home and he went to Taba's shop to look for Lolo. Of course, Lolo had never been seen since because he never sold any more goods. In short, years passed and Kid grew up with Joel and Irma, his new parents. He was happy, but he still hoped to meet Lolo someday. One morning, while having breakfast, the maid told Kid that there was a call for him from the hospital. Immediately, the three of them realized who was in the hospital at that time, so Kid rushed to go there. He walked slowly to the ICU and there he saw Lolo, who was lying asleep. Looking at the figure of an old man he knew, Kid was devastated. Lolo woke up and saw Kid in front of him, making him shed tears. Lolo was happy to see the little boy he used to be with had grown up into a successful person. They both then went to Taba's shop. There, Lolo sold his old Polaroid camera to Taba just to reminisce that they had memories together in this shop. After that, they went to a karaoke place. Kid could finally sing along because he could read, but then Lolo fell asleep. Kid thought he was being pranked, but unfortunately, it wasn't. Lolo finally breathed his last. He left Kid for the second time, but this time for good. After Lolo was taken away, Kid opened Lolo's bag. Inside was a box, and the contents were photos of their togetherness Lolo took with his Polaroid camera. From those photos, Kid realized that Lolo always accompanied him from the shadows. Lolo never left him. It was just that he didn't want to meet Kid because he didn't want Kid to have the same fate as him.